to Drummers Only Radio. Drummers Only is the UK's leading drum shop with store locations in Glasgow and Leeds. Our podcasts are full of interviews, gear reviews, and much more from the unique perspective of a drum shop. The show is hosted by two pasty Scottish dudes who talk real fast. Whoa, slow down there, Braveheart. So here's Chris, the Glasgow shop manager, and Adam, the social media manager. Be sure to like, subscribe, and let's do this.
How you doing, man?
You know, hanging in there.
Yeah, the moustache is coming on.
Triumphant, yeah, love it.
Oh yeah, the old
handlebars.
Love it.
well, it's it's lockdown.
Yeah, man. I mean, what better is there to do than grow a bitchin' moustache, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
So how's life?
Like everyone, it's been mad, isn't it? You know.
Yeah, it's been a crazy year.
So I lost a good friend of mine, died of COVID on New Year's Eve.
Oh
shit.
A Scottish drummer friend of mine, funnily enough. And it was a bit of a shocker because it's always a shocker losing a friend, but he was pretty fit, older than me, but not, you wouldn't consider him to be a really old fella. So it sort of shocked me. I'm thinking, God, I better look after myself. But I'm 51 now, so I'm up for the jab before May.
Oh, brilliant.
But it just makes you think. This thing is, and then at the same time, another guy that I know the same age as him, he had it, and he just had, mild cold symptoms.
Wild. Sorry to hear that, man.
So it made me think, you know what? I don't want to give it a try, if I'm honest with you.
Yeah. I mean, are you pretty well secluded where you are?
Yeah. So in Norfolk, actually, Norfolk's pretty good, and it has been, because we're just in the middle of nowhere, and it's a little village, and everyone is treating it like that, like it's a little village mentality. So everyone's being actually very, very safe, and there's a rare amount of cases really around here.
Yeah, good.
We're good, and to be honest with you, I'm working so much in here. It's constant. I just feel so. It's a funny one. On the one side, it's like it's horrible, and the music business is suffering massively, and people are dying. And then on the other hand, I'm busier than I've ever been in this room.
And you're blessed as well because you're also working from home. You're not having to go anywhere.
That's absolutely. I just walk across the field, and weather permitting and molehills permitting, I can get here pretty quickly.
Do you think that is how it's going to be now, rather than going into town and being in a room with 30 people? It's just going to be remote. So
I left The Voice 2 years ago because this studio was starting to get busier, So I thought I'd better give it a go, and then what happened. So I was already focusing on doing remote recordings anyway because of my age, and I don't want to. If I don't have to, I don't want to go to London. It's a 3.5 hour drive for me.
Right. Yeah.
And it's my choice. We moved out here for the reasons that we did. But so I think for me, yes, this is it now. It's really sort of established the way that I work, and I will do sessions. I did a session. I did the Children in Need single that came out, towards the end of last year, and we did that. That was one of the only sessions I did with other people last year at a studio called British Grove, and they were very mindful of all the restrictions. So we had our own area, and Jamie Cullum was in a booth, so we were nowhere near him, stuff like that. But yeah, for me personally, it's going to be remote. But I think also the business has just everyone has taken it on board. There's so many different ways of communicating now, and people seem much happier to let you just get on with it and then import that into their session. There's no options now. If you want a musician to play on your record, it's got to be remote. I hope that it gets back to some sort of normality where the studios are open, but it's definitely it's changed for me personally for the better, really.
Yeah, it sounds it. It sounds like you're really happy, actually.
Oh, it's mega. I mean,
Yeah.
I every single day I get a session, and it's totally all sorts of different things, and all from all over the world as well. I'm just about to start a Taiwanese pop band, which is bizarre. I did a Russian superstar, Zemfira, her name is, and she's like the Russian Adele. Millions of sort of sales, and that's coming out soon, I think. And this is all through lockdown. I've just done a movie with Hans Zimmer. I've just done Boss Baby 2.
Oh, amazing.
Amazing, cool.
So I did all that here, and it's like, it's mad.
Do you get called to be you?
Yeah, I do. From certain producers that I work with. I'm working with Gary Barlow's doing another album, so I'm working with him now, and he likes the way that I play. He wants me to do what he wants, but we've known each other a long time now, so I think he likes me to do stuff that he knows that I do, like certain fills and certain feels and stuff like that. I mean, with pop music though, you don't really get called most of the time to be you. I'm always copying a demo part or a program part or something like that. Yeah. But in the end, you can't help but sort of put your own stuff in.
Yeah, sorry. I guess what I mean is, like, I remember reading or listening to Picaro talk about it. People would try and ask him to be someone else. Can you play like this guy, or can you? Do you get that, or do you get just like, we want you, we want your sound. That's what we're here for. Most
people are cool, and they thank God for Instagram. That's another thing that sort of has been amazing for me, like an amazing sort of advert. So people get to see what I'm capable of on that. And a lot of people ask me to kind of do that. I often get people saying, oh, and they'll send me a link to a video and go, oh, we want this snare sound, or, can you play a bit like this? That's happening. Sometimes people will get me to play something that I can't do it. Somebody asked me to do something the other day, and it was like a proper prog thing. I've done, I've sort of had my dalliances with prog music, but when it starts getting sort of double bass drum world, that definitely isn't me. I'm stuck then. Yeah. It's tricky. So, but and then I sort of negotiate with them and go, look, I'll try my hardest to make it sound as close as I can to what you've programmed. And most people, that client in particular, was all right with what I played in the end, because I brought the energy. I just didn't play exactly what they had, because I couldn't.
But you brought the vibe that they were looking for, which is kind of
the energy and the vibe was there, and I think in the end, I think that's all people really, they want a good feeling, good vibing, good sounding recording.
I was just funny. I was actually, when you're talking about Instagram, I just happened to be browsing through your Instagram last night, and I seen on your stories that you've just joined TikTok, which right now in 2021 is like the kind of the platform to kind of get noticed and things like that. So, and you kind of touched on it briefly there, but how much has social media had an influence on your career? Because I think I followed you since like about 2013 or something like that, when you first started uploading playing videos, and it was great.
Yeah. So I think I've been on Instagram almost 10 years. I guess it's nearly that. It certainly is with Twitter. Mm-hmm. It's more than that with Twitter. It's a producer mate of mine sort of describes it as the way that my thing's gone. He's like, it's like a perfect storm. I started getting into social media as it certainly Instagram started to develop. I think, I don't know for certain, but I think I was probably one of the first drummers on Instagram to sort of have not just a phone sound. I started to up the game a little bit, and it's like, oh God, this guy's actually, where's the audio coming from? Definitely to start off with. And now, of course, everybody's got a studio. that's one of the things that, the outcomes of what's going on. But I think if you look at the numbers, it takes a while to get 200,000 people.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And consistent, I got a lot of shit from drummers my age when I started. Wow. Absolutely. No saying, way. Why are you doing this? Why? Oh mate, come on. You don't need to do this. What are you doing it for? it's not my thing. These are just the things that some drummers would say to me. You need to keep a little bit of mystery.
Wow.
Loads of potentially that they might be right, but as it's turned out, I am over the moon that I did it.
Well, Mike Johnson spoke very openly about this when COVID hit. Like, all you guys that want to be online teachers should have started 5 years ago, because now when it's all shut down, it's just it's A, too saturated because everybody wants to do it, and you don't have a profile at all, but you have all that straight away.
I bet those guys spoke to you were kicking themselves now. Absolutely.
That's the interesting thing. Some of those guys are kicking themselves. And I can't mention names, because they're sort of friends of mine, really. But that some guys are scrabbling around now to try and get some sort of profile happening, to try and get the idea out that they can do remote recording. But so I'm starting my 9th year of the studio here. So it's about 9 or 10 years. So yeah, I'm starting my 9th year of having this place. And it's taken that long, to get that amount of people. The biggest thing, I'm lucky, and this is again my producer friend, about the perfect storm. He describes it. I had a recording career before I got the studio, and before I said that I could do remote. So I was very lucky. I had established myself as I played on Adele's record, blah blah blah, before any of this happened, really. And James Morrison and Robbie and all that under my belt, all done. But the hardest thing is to convince people that you can do it. It's not, they know you can play the drums. They're like, nice one. Yeah, we know that. But what are the 15 files that you send or 20 files, what they're going to sound like, and that's the tricky bit. And all of those things I've spent over the last sort of 8 or 9 years. I spent much more time on Pro Tools and microphone and technology and trying to figure all that shit out than I have really played. It's mad.
I mean, when you were doing sessions in town, were you having these conversations about Pro Tools with engineers so that it's just like a little, guys, I know what I'm talking about, not getting in anybody's road, but just, what preamp are you using? And, little, just drop it in. Is that a way that you can sort of let people know, I guess, that you can do it?
So over the years, I've always watched what people do. I've always been interested in the process of recording, even though when you're in like if I'm at Trevor's, there's people, obviously you just play the drums. If they say we want the drums a little bit damper, you do whatever you need to do your end, and then they're also adjusting their end, but you never get in the way of each other. The engineer won't come in, hopefully anyway, the engineer won't come in and start putting loads of tape all over your drums and like, oh no, and taping up your cymbals or whatever. They'll suggest to you maybe that rack tom needs to be a little bit less sustain or more sustain or whatever. But I definitely watched what people did because you play, come back into the control room, sit down, listen, and you're sat behind the dude who's and I always liked it, really, really enjoyed the whole recording process. Like, it was my favorite thing before I even had a studio, the process of recording. And then when it was like, well, maybe I could do something and this room might sound all right, who knows? That was incredible. And so what you're saying, I mean, essentially, some of those engineers they've watched me over this sort of 8 or 9 year period getting my shit together. And I've bugged them. I've bugged every producer that I know, every engineer that I know, continually. And I feel very fortunate that I can talk to producers that make top 40 records and go, what's going on with my bass drum?
Mm-hmm.
In confidence. And a couple of them will go, well, have you checked the phase? This is, in early days. What's that?
Yeah. Well, absolutely.
What is that? And now, I mean, it's amazing now. There's so many guys recording and so many people really into it. I mean, someone said to me the other day, aren't you worried that now everyone's got a studio? And it's like, well, it's that's like saying, are you worried that there's another drummer in the world? Do you know what I mean? That's to me, really.
Yeah.
You know, it's like there's loads of different drummers, there's loads of different people recording. I kind of feel I've got my lane, as they say in the States.
Yeah. You're right, like just because a drummer has a high-end kit doesn't mean they know how to use it effectively, you know, they just have it, you know. And I guess in the world that we live in now, like a lot of drummers are they're at the start of your 9-year process, you know. So you've already got 9 years on them, you know.
Well, this, you know, without sort of pouring cold water on people's aspirations, how lucky have I been that I can talk to Trevor Horn, Grammy award-winning producers, engineers, while I'm getting it together. I've had the time and luck to get this place together, and I can play already, and I'm established already as a recording drummer, and I know how long it's taken me. So yeah, it's a long process. But you know what I've always said to guys though, is that you might get a sound that people can't get. You know, you might have a little room that sounds a certain way, you might have a drum kit tuned a certain way, you might have a feel that's a particular feel that just is something that no one else can do. And that's why I never tell people to, you know, I don't put people off if they go, I've only got a couple of mics, I can't compete with you. It's like, well, you might be able to, especially now with loops and the way that contemporary drums sound. If you think about some of the loops that people use, there might be 1 or 2 mics that have just been processed, and people can do that. You know, I can think of a couple of guys, younger guys now that I know that have got little setups, and they haven't spent a huge amount of money, but they sound mega. And I'm thinking, it's impressive, you know, the speed that people have got it together, you know.
There's a channel you should check out, Ash. There's a guy that me and Chris have been obsessing over the past week, a guy called Rick Beato. Beato, sorry. And he has like loads of different video series where he talks about certain songs that sound great and why they sound great. And he has one specifically talking about the drum sound for Alex Van Halen. And they try and recreate his snare sound basically by using, you know, almost the same drum heads and, you know, dampening it in the same way. And he gets it pretty close, but he's like, do you know what? Ultimately, that sound is just him, you know? So, you know, you can get it as close as damn it to, you know, what it should be, but sometimes it's just the person that actually makes that sound happen.
They're definitely, my best mate is a producer, and he happens to be the producer that does James Morrison and Cher and stuff. And we talk about it, and we, you know, sometimes we do a Zoom. Well, the Windmill Arms will open, and we'll have a little drink, and we'll be on Zoom, and we'll just be chatting. And Cher's going to do another record. We're talking about the whole Zoom thing, actually streaming stereo, a stereo feed from mine. So we are chatting about it. But he talks about what you're on about there, Chris, which is the sort of pyramid. It really does start with the drummer. Then it's the drum kit. Then we feel it's the room that drum kit and that drum is in. And then it's the gear. And I'm with him there. I think, you know, if you got Bernard Purdy on a Pearl Export that's in the back room of someone's rehearsal space, he's still going to sound pretty good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then you put him in a good room, and then you get him on a better kit, and it's like, hey, presto. You know, so I'm convinced it's drummer, drum kit, the way it's tuned, and then the room, because the room can really make a massive difference to the way it all sounds. And then I think it's the gear, because a lot of people think, oh, I've got to get the best microphones in the world for my bass drum and my overheads and blah blah blah, and it's the other way around. I don't think so. I think you should get your room sounding cool. You've got to get your thing together, you know, consistently hitting. That's the thing about recording. It's a consistency.
That's funny you mentioned that. I was listening to the Tom McRae record you did, the King of Cards.
Oh yeah.
On the drive up, I love Tom McRae, and it was weird because when we were checking, I'd kind of forgotten about him. Coming up playing, these first two records I was really into his first two records, but I put that album on, and you sound amazing. You sound really, everything's in its place. It's super deliberate. There's no fat on any of it. It's really, really well played and really well recorded. The drums sound amazing. And that was what really struck me. I think there was one song, I can't remember the name of all the songs, but you play this kind of tom bass groove. It's like, that's just, and it just got into my head, like, the pattern was obviously very deliberate. What you knew exactly what you were going to play, and where you played it and where you put it was just like, that's amazing. And I think that's the difference between guys like yourself who are pro and people that are coming up. It's one of the differences anyway.
And I think that's to do with, like I say, my experience before recording. Because I know some drummers hate it. Some drummers, they play and they go into the control and they can't listen to themselves back because they hear all the warps. Yeah, I mean, we're all like it. But I grew to sort of love that. It because each time I'd go in and listen to myself, I'd learn something new about my playing. And over time, you get good at recording. I mean, Mike Johnson, funny enough, when I played once on 21 drums, he said, when you play, it sounds like it's recorded when I'm actually playing in a room. And I think that's because, same deal, I sort of, I find that drummers, Carl Brazil does it as well. He sounds like he's doing a recorded performance when he plays. And it's almost like you learn to self-mix. So you mix yourself as you're playing, if you know what I mean.
Like the GAD thing.
Yeah, same vibe, and getting everything so it fits, so the bass drum's not too loud, and the bass drum and snare drums sit well, and then you open the microphones up, and hopefully it's going to be cool.
Did you have to learn to do that?
I think it's just a part of the process of recording.
Right.
You have to do it, try and keep consistency, and then before you know it, like I'm 51 now, and I've been doing it a long time. Eventually your backbeat it's going to be all right every time. Eventually, just the focus on that, and recording, I think, definitely helped me focus on those things.
I'm going to switch gears a little bit here. So obviously, if you're watching this episode, you can see that Ash's backdrop is beautiful. It has, like gold records. It has a lot of snare drums back there, a lot of cymbals. So one thing I was going to ask you was, if you get an email from a client, say, and they're looking for a specific drum sound, or they're looking for you to record on their track or their project or whatever, how do you go about building a drum sound? Do you have a default kind of set or, setup that you go to? Or is it purely, do you build it from the ground up every time?
Well, my kit, I don't know if you've noticed in the videos, my kit doesn't really change. It's mind-boggling what you can do with just a little bit of tuning and then adjustment in Pro Tools. So I've got a bunch of like in Pro Tools, you probably can do it in Logic and all the other DAWs, but you can save a template. So I'll save rock sound or something like, something as simple as that, basic rock sound. And I would have worked on that sound. And when it opens up, it incorporates more of my room mics. There might be, gates on certain drums. And then I've just got to make sure that the drums themselves, I pick the right snare drum, and maybe move the dampening a bit in the bass drum, swap a couple of toms maybe, but just make sure it sounds about right in the room. And then my template will do the rest. And I've got that for like, a Nashville dry air sort of 70s sound. I've got that. Reggae things, obviously, gated pop things, all sorts of stuff. So when someone asks me to do something, I usually go, okay, I'll start here, and I fish out a template, and I'll start from that place, and then try and match. Usually, people send demo drums, or they'll send an idea of the sound that they want, or references. They'll go, this is the record we like. Can we get it sort of near there? And I'll try. But I've got places where I can start for sure.
Just really interesting because I've always wondered about it. When you post up clips on Instagram, you're right. Now thinking back, more often than not, the kit is the same. The big changes are usually the snare drum or the hi-hats or maybe even the cymbals, So I was just curious, and you did something that I really enjoyed where you put up, I think it was a Yamaha snare drum that you had, and it was what the snare sound that you used on Set Fire to the Rain. So I thought stuff like that was really cool, and it's it got me thinking, like, well, why, how does he go about picking a certain sound for a certain vibe,
That's a good one, that snare, for instance. But so there's a couple of things that I've always got on. I've got one that sounds like a good hip hoppy sounding snare drum, and then I've got that Fat Max, as it's been named, that does that thing, and that works. That's interesting that snare drum can, if it's tuned up a little, it works in a lot of different places. And I was doing that fat sound. I've been doing it for years, well before again I got this place. It's now hip to have that sort of fat sound, but I, years ago I worked on it because I realized that producers really like it and singers like it, because the bass drum and the snare drum operate here in the sonic, the frequency range, and most vocal, male and female, is above that, so it doesn't get in the way of the vocal.
Yeah.
So producers really like that.
Yeah.
Love that thing, because all of the other shit's flying above it, and it just doesn't get in the way. It does what it's supposed to be doing, and everyone's got all of this huge amount of space above it, frequency wise. So that's why I kind of get that fat sound, and it's permanently dialed in. One of the things that I'd say to the engineers, say at Soan Studios, which isn't there anymore, but I'd say, it's almost like I knew at some point I'm going to get a studio. I'd say to them, what's the biggest pain in the ass when you're doing a drum session? The engineers would say that's one of the things that's annoying about drum sessions, is that you have to set all the mics up every time, get a sound, and when it's done, you break it all down and do it again. And they pretty much consistently, they all said, wouldn't it be great if we could just leave it up?
Talking about gear, you did a session for Easy Drummer for ToonTrack.
Yeah,
which I like all that stuff. That was just how did all that come around? Because that was really cool.
They approached me to do a pop. I think that's how it happened. I'm pretty sure we got contacted, and then they said to me, it was amazing. They said, any producer, any studio. I'm like, wow,
that's pretty cool,
isn't it? So the incredible budgets they have. Really, in sample libraries. Definitely, they spent more money on that than some of the records that I've worked on, for sure.
Wow.
So, how did it differ from a regular session?
Well, there's no real playing.
Right. Okay.
On the one hand, it's pretty tedious because I'm doing one right now, in fact.
Right.
From here, it's quite tedious because you get the sound, and then you have to go. So, like a hi-hat will take 2.5 hours.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's bonkers.
Because you've got to play every level, and then it's slightly open. There's 5 different areas of it being open. There's on the side, there's on the tip. There's obviously pedaling sounds, and the rides take about the same, because if you whack a ride, it's still going.
Yeah.
For sure.
And it's still going.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And well, I can't hear it, but somebody else in the room can. So it's still go. It's like it takes a long time, and you have to, and so it's pretty tedious, but financially it's pretty rewarding. And it is sort of creative in a way, because you have to get so many different sounds. Like this new one I'm doing, I think there's going to be like 10 kit sounds.
Wow. Because I think the first one, there's 3 kits, wasn't there?
Right, on the one, it's called UK Pop, is the...
That's right. Yeah, you're right. But it was like, you see the pictures of it on the ToonTrack website, and there's just scratch snares for days, like notes on the top of them, what each shell is, and that it must be pretty cool to know that your sound is out there for people to use if they want it.
Yeah, it's mega. And at first I was worried about it, because I thought, well, God, no, people would just get UK Pop, they won't bother hiring me. But it's about the drummer, if we're talking about. Well, this is it. Well, hopefully, what they might go, God, this sounds pretty cool. I wonder if we'd get him to play on something. So that's why I do them, because, you know, it gets my name and gets my sound in front of producers and potential producers.
So is this how the voice gig came about? How did that? So I've always been curious what a TV gig's like, because I've never done it. But
well, so, you know, one of the things I say to young drummers, having a sort of long career is about your relationships with the people that over that time. And that is really, really important, that you maintain good relationships with the people that you work with. And, you know, just, sorry to sound like everyone's dad, but it's like, turn up on time.
Yeah.
You know, make sure you know what you're doing. All of these little things really matter in the end, because that's what keeps you being hired. So the MD that's still on The Voice now, David Tench, I worked with it. Well, he saw me playing with an artist called Lewis Taylor years back. I was playing at the Jazz Cafe, and he really liked my playing. And then I saw him again. I auditioned for Daniel Bedingfield, and I couldn't go back for my second audition, and the gig had already kind of gone to another dude. But he was in that room when I was auditioning. And he was MDing Daniel, and he was also MDing Natasha Bedingfield. Mm-hmm. So he hired me to play with Natasha. That went really, really well. This is years ago, you know. And then I started playing with Will Young. He gets the gig with Will Young. So we're both on the same gig again. We did about 8 years with Will. Really great band, like a fantastic band. Will's a brilliant singer and a great artist to work for as a bloke, you know. And that band was special, you know. It really was a great sounding band. And then, you know, a few years later, he calls me and said, I'm doing The Voice. And I'm like, oh man. He goes, I can't think of anyone better than you. And I'm like, yeah, but Dave, it's a reading gig, you know, and my reading was nowhere near up to scratch. And he said, well, look, I'll send you some of the parts. He said, because, you know, it's not like Frank Zappa songs every time. You know, it's pop music, and it's a natural place for me to be, you know. And he wanted me to bring my approach to pop music to the show and make it a bit more less sort of you know, BBC band sounding. He wanted to make it sound more contemporary, and the approach that we all have when we do a gig, you know. And in fact, he hired Will Young's bass player as well to do it.
Oh, amazing.
Cool.
Yeah. Ben Epstein is still there on the show. So he sent me some parts, and I thought about it, and we went in, and we were only supposed to do one series, actually, because the band at the time, I think it was Ian Thomas on drums, Jerry Meehan, who plays bass with Robbie. Robbie was out, and I think they basically had a bunch of the guys couldn't do it because they were touring, their commitments with something else. So we were just hired to do it for one sort of short series, really. And we smashed it. And then it's like 7 years later, I'm like, God, I'm still fucking doing this thing. And they are still doing it. So they're like 8 or 9 years. I mean, it's bonkers.
It's funny, you just brought up one of the questions I had, which was about maintaining relationships, because you've played with guys like Delamitri for years and years, you know. And
yeah, we've got a new record coming out, actually.
So like, how, this is going to sound like a really stupid question, but how do you maintain relationships for that length of time?
I guess it's, you know, you've got to have musicians, it's interesting, isn't it, that work ethic. I've always had a strong sort of work ethic and make sure that I do well and for people. And if you do that, people remember, if you've got some sort of modicum of talent as well involved, obviously a little bit. But if you can do the sort of business side of it, turn up, be professional, play well, sound good, have a good attitude, that will really get you quite a long way. You know, before you're amazing technique comes involved at all.
Mm-hmm.
You know, being as professional as you can, good sound, good drums, good attitude, can take you quite a way, you know, before any of your technique or your amazing feel come into it. You know, it's like a lot of people, this is what people don't understand. It's like the same with recording. You know, if producers don't care how fast your double strokes are, only drummers care. And you know, that what they want you to do is a musical performance on their track, and if there might be a section where there might be some doubles, and if they want you to do that, you should be, you hopefully will have the technique to be able to do it. But if you start chucking in your amazing, you know, quintuplets on the chorus one, you might not get called back, you know. So it's what I'm trying to get back to what you're saying about relationships. So if you are professional, turn up, do your thing, got a great sound, great attitude, then that will stay with people. If you turn up and do crazy fills in the first chorus, that will stay with people as well. You know, as in they'll never hire you again. But yeah, you know, and it's and then consistently doing that. So I think I did well when I played with Natasha Bedingfield for Dave. We had 8 years with Will Young, and it was, every gig was an absolute joy, you know. And he remembered that. And then when he got the MD job for The Voice, I'm the dude that he thought of.
Have you ever, it's maybe a bit close to the bone, but have you ever got too close with people, or too comfortable, I should say, where you're like, I'm going to chuck this in and see what happens? You know, and you know, you like year 8 of working on Will's gig, and you're halfway through the tour, and you decide to play a fill-in that you've never played before. Well,
that gig, we were consistent on that gig, and that's the thing about pop music. Really, you've got to be consistent, and sing. And that's the thing about singers. You know, they want to hear. Most of the time, they want to hear a similar fill in that same place. They don't want to be put off by anything. But if there's anybody that I've ever played with, Will's probably the closest that I've got to it, you know, in a way that you could, if I wasn't careful, you could be complacent. I've seen people do it. I've watched it happen right in front of my eyes. And then interestingly, those people don't get called back.
Yeah. It's funny. Gerald Hayward talks about all people tend to lose the gig on their day off. You know, like they've maybe
that's fair point. Yeah.
You know, they party too hard, they miss the call, or, you know, just all that kind of stuff, because they don't have the experience to know better, or they've maybe just got a wee bit too complacent. You know, because I think it's very easy, because we call it things like, oh, I'm going to play. It's sometimes very easy to forget that you're working.
That's right.
And there's still a working relationship, and there's still a boss, regardless of how relaxed he or she may be. There is still someone who's in charge, and you need to kind of defer to that person and remember that, you know.
It's an absolute balance, because, you know, I think all artists want you to be, they don't want you to turn up with a pinstripe suit on and play like an accountant. You know, they want you to sort of be an artist in your own area.
Yeah,
but you have got to do a job, you know, and that's it. Some of the best jobs in the world, of course, for some drummers somebody might hire you to play fills, to be as creative as you can possibly be. And I mean, that's amazing. The whole jazz world. If I think about Mark Giuliano, you know, I love him dearly, but Mark gets called to be Mark. And to do all of those things that we all love about his playing. They're like, do that.
Yeah. But just with that thought, you've played with everybody from Faithless to Jeff Lorber to Tom McRae to Natasha. How do you switch gears? How do you switch it in your head to just go, right, well, today?
I was very lucky when I moved to London when I was 21, you know, which is 30 years ago now. I moved Pino Palladino lived pretty much next door to me.
Oh, no way. That's mental. Wow, that's so cool. Sorry.
Oh, that's basically my reaction as well. But when I saw him, I was like, holy fucking shit. You know, I've been in London for like 4 months or something like that. And I was walking back to my flat. I was 21, walking back to my flat, you know, with a pint of milk. And this guy comes out of his house with a gig bag. And I'm like, great, there's a muso in my street. Nice. This is a good start, you know. And he proceeded to go over to a brand new 7 Series BMW and go, whoop, whoop. And I'm like, hang on a minute. It's like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. He's either an accountant that likes playing a bit of bass, or he's a really famous bass player. And he, by this, I must have just been gawping at him like this as I was walking down the street. By which point he saw me looking at him, and he smiled. And when he smiled, I realised when I was 16, when I was in the band about 1986, the bass player in that band was obsessed with Pino, and he had all of the, and also Pino was getting quite a reputation in the mid 80s. You know, he'd already played with Don Henley and all sorts of people. So he's, when he looked at me, I just remembered him from the front cover of Bass Player magazine. And I just went, Mr. Palladino, and he went, yeah. And I was, this is amazing. And he was shocked that I was a drummer, because he thought I was a bass player, because he said he's never been recognized in the street by a drummer before, you know.
Wow.
This is pre-D'Angelo and all that, you know. You got to remember this. He was, at the time, I think he was playing with Eric Clapton a bit. What was his main gig? He always had some amazing sessions. And I, you know, from that moment on, I kind of bugged him every day. And I'd just go to his house, and we'd go downstairs and have a smoke and a cup of tea, and he'd talk about music. And often he would play me things that he'd working on. So I remember he was working on Vinny's solo record. So I heard the DAT recordings of that. Wow. And he was playing with Jeff. He played with Jeff like a couple of years later. And I remember bugging him about that. What's it like playing with Picaro? You know, fucking hell. He was playing with all of the drummers that I loved. I met Manu. Manu used to come and stay at his house. Wow. And I remember one day walking down the street, same vibe. I think I was coming back from the pub, and Pino pulls up, and Manu gets out, and I just couldn't fucking contain myself. Oh my God. Oh my God. So Pino, not only was I really lucky to sort of be able to pick his brains about what should you be, what should you do, how should you do it every day. One of the things that I got from him, a clear message, was that it's just music. And there's no reason why I can't play AC/DC and love it, and also play some brushes and listen to Miles Davis. It's fine. And now it's much, musicians are much more, they're wider with their palette, as it were, and it's much more accepting that you listen to hip hop, but you also like Megadeth or whatever. But in the 90s, it's sort of quite, pop music in particular is quite snobby. If you could play your instrument, then some producers thought he's not the right guy, you know. And you know, snobbiness in the music business is the thing that annoys me the most. So you've got jazz guys that don't like dudes that play music with 3 chords, and then you've got guys that play music with 3 chords that don't like when the fucking harmony changes. It's all fine. Yeah, and Pino he sort of instilled that, or he didn't force it on me. I just noticed that that's what he did. You know, one minute he's playing with Phil Collins, and the next minute he's playing with some fusion artist. And I just thought, that's what I want to do.
That's pretty powerful to get at like 21.
I was very lucky, you know, and I still, now what's even weirder is I play with his son, who I remember being born.
That's bonkers. Wow.
Right. Rocco played on the last James Morrison record. I got him on that gig. because he's like he is a chip off the old block. He sounds like Pino.
Play the same instrument and all that. Play the like a jazz bass and all that stuff. So you play the same kind of vibe.
Same sound, same feel. Actually, that's the thing that fucking freaked me out.
That's amazing.
That it feels the same.
Wow.
Yeah, amazing.
So, Ash, I mean, just looking at your website, you know, like literally the front page is basically just albums and singles that you've played on. You know, I mean, like, I think I read something like it's like 58 top 10 albums, or, you know, like 10 or 18 top 10 singles, you know, all that kind of stuff. Have you got a favourite that you remember the session playing on?
I mean, Set Fire to the Rain, that was a bit of a memorable one, that.
Yeah.
The Adele thing. And do you want the long version or short?
Oh man, long
Always
version.
long.
Always the
Always
long
long.
version.
Right. So what I say to musicians, right, and it also ties in what we were just talking about. So what I say to musicians is you never know, whatever gig you're on, where it might lead. So I was playing with Rick Wakeman.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know who that is? From the keyboard player from Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
70s prog, crazy cape, 25 keyboards. But his drummer broke his arm. Tony Fernandez broke his arm, and they were supposed to do some dates. And this drummer had been with him for 25 years, and it's the first time he couldn't do the tour. And the bass player on the tour said, "I've got a mate, he'll be able to do it." He calls me. Lee Pomeroy plays with Take That, and he plays with all sorts of people. He's going out with. Anyway, he's he was a fantastic bass player, and he was playing with Rick at the time, and he said, "I'll ask Ash." So he calls me and said, "Are you up for it?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Where are the gigs?" And he went, "Cuba, Puerto Rico, Costa Rica, Mexico City support in Asia,
Whoa.
and Leicester." I was like, "Okay, right, okay." So I said, "Well, I'm really up for it." He said, "Listen, mate." He goes, "Listen to the music before you say yes, because it's pretty mad." Like, the first song was a song called "Journey to the Center of the Earth," and it's 20 minutes long. And it's nearly all hi-hat. Oh my God, it's ridiculous. And you can't write it out because you need a fucking fax machine to deal with all the paper. It's ridiculous. So you have to learn songs. Anyway, I took it as a challenge and I learned it. And I met Rick in Cuba at the gig. And I flew out with some of the crew and some of the musicians. And there was a member of the crew, and the bass player said, "Have you met Doom yet?" And I went, "Who's Doom?" And they went, "Oh, it's Rick's tech." And I'm like, "What'd you call him Doom for?" It's like, "Oh, you know, everything's a bind, everything's a pain. You know, he's the sort of bloke, if he won the lottery, he'd be sort of mildly put out." And anyway, I met this bloke, and I immediately got on really well with him. Fantastic dude, and we're still friends today. And he was blown away that I'd come in. He'd been working with Rick for 20 odd years, and he'd never seen another drummer do it. And he was amazed that he saw me on the plane with my headphones, still trying to shed this fucking music. And I think he was sort of impressed with the way that I kind of, again, sort of approached the gig. And then it was successful. In fact, that gig you can see on YouTube, because when I got to Cuba, Rick said, "Oh, we're going to do a DVD tonight." I'm like, "It's my first gig." It's my fucking first gig. I've just met you. And so you can see it. If you search Rick Wakeman Cuba, that is me looking very nervous, because we're playing to 5,500 people, and I'd never played any of those tunes live before ever.
Wow. Fuck me.
So that guy Doom, he said, "You should meet my mate Fraser." And I went, "Who's Fraser?" He went, "Oh, he's an old mate. He used to play with Rick. He used to play guitar with Rick." I was like, "All right." He goes, "Yeah, he's a bit of a producer." I was like, "Fraser." And then I realized, oh, that's the guy that wrote a song that I played on with James Morrison and Nelly Furtado called Broken Strings. So I recognized the name. I was like, okay, this guy wrote, he didn't produce it. Another producer produced it, but I remember him being in the writing credits. I was like, okay. I said, I think I know this dude. I said, I've never met him. He said, he goes, oh, he'd love you, mate. He'd absolutely love you, blah, blah, blah. And sure enough, we got back to England. The gigs had finished a couple of weeks in, and I got a call from Fraser to do a session at Metropolis. And I think, I can't remember, it's such a while ago, I can't remember how it all came about. But he wanted me to get in contact with Pino as well. So, and we did that session. And a little while later, we did CeeLo with Fraser and Pino. It's called the, I'm just having a look at this. Oh, the Lady, it's called The Lady Killer, the record. CeeLo Green, and I played on a few things, and I was very thankful because for the first time in my life, I could give Pino a shout and get him a gig. Anyway, so cut long story short, eventually he said to me, what are you doing Thursday or whatever it was, Thursday night? I said, I'm good. He goes, okay, we've got a session. I'll go in, I'll take my cymbals. He had a drum kit actually at his studio, and I would just take my snare and my cymbals. And I just, it was in Fulham. I was living in Battersea. Went in, opened the door, and Adele sat on a stool looking at her phone. And I'm like, oh, it's for her. Because he didn't tell me what it was the session. Most of the time, you never know until you hear the voice. It's really weird on sessions. It's one of my sort of favorite things. When I was doing The Lion King, the producer at the time said, oh, there's one more song. I was like, okay, cool, sends it. And I'm thinking, oh my God, it's Elton John. Cool. And Fraser said, oh, Adele, this is Ash. He's going to play drums on the track. She went, oh, nice to meet you. She goes, who'd you play for? And I was like, oh, now this is crucial now. I'm thinking, God, this is tricky because she might hate the artist. So it's always a nightmare if those sort of questions are getting bantered about before you even play. Do you know what I'm saying? They might go, I've got to hate him. I hate that guy. And you will then inherit that kind of negative energy.
Yeah. Before you've even hit a drum, that's crazy.
Before you've even played, precisely. So I said, I'll play with Will Young. And she went, fuck off. No, I'll play with Will. She goes, I fucking love Will Young. She said I was at the Brit School when he was on that show, when he was on Pop Idol. And she said, there's this girl that said he wasn't going to win it. And she goes, I was absolutely sure he was going to win. And she kept on winding me up that he wasn't going to win it. She goes, so I lamped her. And she got suspended from school.
Amazing.
For
fucking hell. Well, not amazing, but
for a couple of months for hitting this girl because of Will. So she really did love Will Young, Anyway, so that was a great start. I played with one of her, favorite singers, and we did the session. She was fantastic, really into it. She came up, there's a little snare drum, military sort of snare roll thing, the overdub that we did. And that was her idea. She goes, I hear this sort of snare thing. And she sang it, and I went in, I can remember I went in to do an overdub. So they played back the track and I'm doing the snare drum overdub. And I could see her through the glass going, that's it. Which is amazing. And we did the session, very positive vibe. And she gets in her taxi and off she goes. And I said to Fraser, we cracked a beer open at the end of the session. I said, see you at the Grammys. Ha 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 ha. It's bearing in mind only 19 was out.
Right.
And she was quite famous, but not as famous as she is now. And about 4 or 5 months later, Fraser said, do you want to come to the Grammys? I'm like, you're joking. He went, she's up for 6.
Fuck. For that track?
For that record, yeah.
Amazing. That's amazing.
But yeah, So then I end up in Los Angeles at the Grammys, and I had an incredibly mad, bonkers week. But what I say to people, though, is there's a direct line from a bloke that wears a cape to Adele. So you never know. And that guy was Doom, you know. That was the actual connection.
It's like 6 degrees of separation.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You know, like, how do you get from Rick Wakeman to Adele? Ash Soan.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
And a guy like you're saying, like Doom, I'm just going to call him Doom because I think that's probably one of the best names I've ever heard. You know, a guy like Doom, like someone who's maybe got a bit of ego about them would write off, you know, someone who's just a tech, you know, in open quotation marks, you know. But, you know, he's basically was your kind of ticket to Adele, you know,
Yeah,
for lack of a better term. So it's just always be nice to everyone you meet, you know.
correct. And you know, it's tricky, isn't it? You can't force being nice. If you're an arsehole, you're an arsehole, you know. But getting back, you know, to what you said earlier, you know, how do you maintain those professional relationships? And it's like you've just got to be cool, you know. Just try and be cool when you're working, and people remember that. And most of the time, it's easy to be cool when you're working, you know, because it's such a brilliant job that we all do. It's when it gets stressful, that's when people sort of show their true colours, really. And that's the point where your professional approach to your gig really starts coming into play. When it starts going wrong on stage, when the session's not going well. You know, Trevor Horn was introduced by, interviewed by Rhythm Magazine, and they said, you know, why do you like Ash? Because he can have anybody. He has had everybody. He's had Caro, Gad, Vinny. You know, Trevor's hired everyone, and he said, "Oh, it's his jokes." And he said, well, because he said Ash has got this thing where he can feel when the session is getting slightly stressful, and he'll 9 times out of 10 drop a one-liner in, and the air clears, and the productivity and the creativity is sort of maintained. Because I've broken the potential negative vibe that's in the room. Because, you know, we all know what that's like. Most people have had an experience of when it's not going well in a studio, and it can be awful. But Trevor just said Ash is great. It just feels it coming, and I'll drop a joke about a trombonist.
I was going to ask you, kind of again, sort of switching gears a bit, about your relationship with Mike Johnson, and of course you mentioned earlier on Mark Juliana, you know, doing the camps with those guys. What's that experience like, and kind of passing on, you know, again you have to take off your studio drummer hat and put on your teacher hat almost, you know, what's it like in those experiences?
Yeah, well, what's great is that Mike runs it, really. So it's being run by a professional drum educator, and Mike, you know, he identifies that the people that he brings in, he sort of wants you to do your thing. So I have to think about it as education, and Mike's very good at steering it that way, but really he just wants me to tell that Adele story, or the, you know, Meeting Pino story, and give people that experience of like, oh, this is what can happen. Because if you talk to anybody, any professional musician, we've all got a similar path. You're playing in a pub and someone sees you play it, or a similar story to that. I was playing in a band and it happened to be the guitar player from da-da-da, you know. So with Mike runs it. I really enjoy the hang. It's a proper hang at 21 Drums, and Mark and I just got on like a house on fire immediately. Far too much Guinness. But again, you know, that guy, well, both of them, you know, just fantastic blokes, you know. that happen to play the drums, and it's really great. And you know, while I've done that 21 drums, Carlock came in one year, and it's like, well, that's a pretty hefty drummer to be knocking around with. But what he is possibly one of the most humble musicians I've ever met. And I'm thinking, somebody with that amount of experience and can play like that, if he can be so humble, then there's no excuse for anybody else.
Yeah, exactly. If someone's like that from the top, you know, someone who's not at that rung on the ladder yet, you know, has no excuse to have a bit of an ego about, you know.
Yeah, we were lucky enough to have him in clinic a few years ago, and he was super cool, just super chill.
Amazing.
It's the wonderful thing about drummers. There's not very many people that come through the doors that aren't cool. If anyone, you know, if anyone.
That's right. And to be honest with you, especially when you start getting on to the higher sort of, I hate to sort of say it like that, but you know, the sort of more well-known, famous drummers, there's no way they're going to get to that point by being a sort of, you know, for want of a better word, you know, an arsehole. It's just, it's not going to happen.
No.
Because doors won't open for you on a playing level and on, you know, if you think about it, so the drum education, the drum side of things, which is Mike's world, and you know, endorsements and clinics, and I've done one for you guys, and all of that stuff, that is its own industry, and you have to be cool with those guys too. It's just the same as being in the studio. It's the same attitude you should bring to it, I think. And I honestly can't think of anybody that professionally that I wouldn't want to work with again.
Yeah. I could see that from that level, you know. It must be the same for other, like for bassists, for keyboard players, for guitarists as well, you know.
Yeah.
Because you all need each other to scratch each other's back.
Absolutely.
You know, if being nice to a keyboard tech gets you a Grammy-winning gig, you know, be nice to everybody.
Well, you know, I obviously had no idea that that's what would have happened.
No, of course not. But you know, it wouldn't have happened if you were an arsehole.
That's right.
You know,
absolutely. So, and it actually wouldn't have happened if I'd listened to them calling him Doom and saying, well, you know. And actually, I thought he's not like that at all. He's cool. There's another story. I can't name the band, but they're a massive British band, and I got the gig. It's utterly surreal, right? So they were having problems with their drummer, and the stadium band, right? And I got the call to be on standby to play for them. And it transpired that it was a guitar tech that had seen me working with another artist that put me up for it. And when they first said, oh, we've got your name from, I was like, who the hell's that? Like, you know, and then they mentioned the band. I was like, okay, he was the guitar tech on that gig. And like, same deal. He must have I didn't have to talk to him, really. He was the guitar tech on the gig. He wasn't my tech. But he had enough influence with this particular band, which were enormous, that when it came to, there was problems with said drummer and some names started getting chucked about, mine was thrown into the pot. A couple of positive sort of reviews, as it were, came from some other people about me, and I got the gig. And it's the same deal. So, and that gig, I did it for 3. Well, I didn't. It's the most lucrative gig I've never done. It's honestly like thousands of pounds not to play.
Wow.
And it's amazing. And so I had to go to, they were having problems one particular day when they were playing Wembley Stadium, and I had to go. And the way that I did it, because I was fully in the voice at that point, is that I got them to send me a live rehearsal. And I got the guy from The Voice to transcribe the gig. Right. So I put it on my iPad. So I actually got it written out on my iPad. And I'll never forget it. I had to go to Wembley because if there was a bust up, they had a whole thing arranged. It's like, if it goes down, the singer's going to say, any drummers out there, and he goes, and you're going to miraculously going to appear, blah, blah, blah. And so I went to Wembley, and I had my rucksack with an iPad and my sticks. And it was the guy on the metal detector. He goes, why have you got drumsticks? And I went, if I told you, you wouldn't believe me. He went, all right, come on in. But it's like, because I might be doing the gig. I didn't say that to him. I said, if I told you, you wouldn't believe me. He was like, all right, anyway. Obviously, I'm not going to kill anybody with a pair of sticks. And sure enough, they started playing, and I messaged the one of the management team, and they're like, no, it's all good. And I got on a train and came home. But I had a couple of those. I had to go to Dublin. I had to fly up to Manchester, and I had to go to London. But I never ended up playing for them. They always managed to keep their
work it out.
Yeah. I can't see which band it was, but they were absolutely mega.
You need to write a book, man.
Yeah. Oh, it's funny, that one. And the funny thing is, I saw their manager, and he thanked me for being so sort of like professional and
discreet
about it. And I said, you know what? I look forward to not playing with them again next summer. You know? And he laughed.
I just love the thought of you going up the road and someone's like, oh, how was the gig? And you're like, don't know. Like, no idea.
Yeah. But what was interesting, so on their rehearsal sort of recording, some of the arrangements are like, really? Did you do that? Like odd time bars and stuff like that. And I thought, no, someone's just come in early. I'll have to mark that and remember that might not be that length. Yeah. It might just be that someone's just gone like now, you know. Yeah. But when I watched them, that's what they did. It's like, wow. So it is like properly arranged. It's like amazing. You get them when you've been playing for 40 odd years.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I'm tapped out.
Yeah. Ash, thank you so much for this. This has been a blast.
Yeah, it's been a total pleasure, man. It's a total pleasure.
So for those who maybe, don't follow you on social media, where can people find you?
The one that that's most popular is Instagram. Mm-hmm. Just Ash Soan at Instagram. I'm on Twitter. Like I say, I've just hit up TikTok. I've got to get my dancing together. Facebook I'm on, and YouTube. In fact, YouTube I'm going to start doing some streaming, I think, there, and I'm start going to get involved with my YouTube channel a bit more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you were mentioning to us briefly as well, you were looking to get your drums going through, Zoom sessions and all that. So that'll be really cool when you're able to do all that. Yeah, exactly.
So I'll be able to stream some kind of educational thing. That's getting close. Also, I'm talking. We're in the process of trying to figure out a sort of drum camp, but here at the Windmill.
Oh, cool. Wow.
When all this nonsense is over and we're able to do it again, we're talking about it, and we're looking into getting some sort of accommodation, like shepherd's huts or something like that, so people can properly camp.
Wow. And
there'd be a shower and, all the sort of, the niceties. It won't be like Glastonbury. But then do a proper drum camp in here. Sort of 6-8 people for weekends to start with. So that's coming around the corner too. Wow. Yeah, just keep on following me. Apologies for my my colourful language.
Oh no,
not
it's
at all.
All good, man.
All good.
All good.
I get quite passionate about my business.
Absolutely.
As well you should.
Well,
quite rightly so.
Looking forward to seeing what comes out, maybe new Delamitri stuff and records that are coming out. I hope that you manage to stay safe before you're vaccinated.
Yes, I hope so too. I mean, I just it's unless moles can get it, I'm safe. I'm just going to go across the field.
Brilliant. Well, until you're back, next time you're up, man, give us a shout. We've moved location, but do come and see us, and if you can.
as you know, I'll be up in Glasgow to rehearse when we
for sure.
Get back together.
Back at Berkeley too, see Stevie. But yeah,
I'm an honorary Scot, really. It's
Absolutely,
been so long
man.
now.
Absolutely.
Like 20, 25 years, something like that.
amazing.
I've been playing with that band, yeah.
Well, aye, thanks ever so much, mate, and
Pleasure.
we'll catch you soon. Thanks for listening to this episode of Drummers Only Radio.
You can find us online at www.drummersonly.co.uk.
Drop us a line. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at Drummers Only UK.
Make sure you subscribe to the podcast. We're on Apple, Spotify and YouTube.
Any questions? info@drummersonly.co.uk is the email, or if you need leads, it's leads@drummersonly.co.uk.
Thanks again for listening.
And we'll see you next time.